Hi, and welcome to My Words, Our Journey, the podcast. I'm Monty, your author and host. This is episode 2 of Zodiac, Attempted Redemption. To recap, in episode 1, we met Clara, a seasoned journalist at the San Francisco Chronicle. We also find out that she's received a letter, one that just appeared at her desk. Clara thought she had seen it all in her time at the paper, but the first 5 words shattered that belief and placed a chill upon her bones. This is the Zodiac speaking. Then we go back 78 days and meet Michael and his girlfriend Nikki, a young couple just trying to find their way. Nikki, taking classes, working hard. She has the goals, dreams, and of course, to get things done. Michael, not the opposite exactly. He was also taking classes, but he hadn't found his way just yet. Something that did not sit well with his parents. Parents that had burdened their son with the task of getting his grandparents' home ready to sell. Michael's grandfather had passed away, and his grandmother was in the local senior center. His grandfather had been his mentor, the one he could always count on, and he'd passed away only a few months ago. Now we continue with Chapter 5, entitled, Trying. The church service had been beautiful. Morning sun poured through stained glass, casting slow moving patches of color across the back of the pews. Michael and Nikki sat side by side, hands lightly clasped, singing the last verse of Great is Thy Faithfulness. He wasn't the best singer, not by a long shot, but he tried. They always sat towards the back. Nikki's mom preferred front and center. Nikki, she'd never liked the attention. The pastor's message was about endurance, about keeping faith when life gets hard. Michael found himself more affected than he expected to be. Afterwards, they shook hands with the pastor, grabbed a donut and 2 coffees in the fellowship hall. Michael stood by the window as Nikki caught up with one of her old youth group friends. Michael stayed quiet, sipping his drink, watching Nikki laugh. For a moment, he forgot about the house, about school, about his grandfather. All he saw was her, and he was grateful. He watched her face light up with joy so easily, so naturally. He wondered what it would feel like to carry that kind of peace inside, to move through the world without the static or the pressure. For the next few days, Michael stuck to a routine. He got up early, worked on the house, went to class, came back, and worked some more. Nikki had a couple of important exams coming up, so she hadn't been around much. It was really messing with his head. He found himself irritable. That morning alone, he had silently cursed out 6 different people on his way to campus, and that just wasn't him. Nikki would be back soon. Things would settle. That's what he told himself. At the house, he had cleared out both of the spare bedrooms. He hadn't thrown much away. Couldn't bring himself to. But he'd made decent progress staging the garage for the estate sale. He'd swept it clean, laid down tarps, lined things up. He was trying. His parents stopped by one day without calling first. They walked through the house slowly, silently, exchanging those glances he hated, half judgment, half disappointment. At the car, his mom finally broke the silence. "We can see you're trying, son." But before Michael could thank her, his father stepped in. "Michael," he said, "when are you going to realize life requires commitment? Not halfway, full commitment. To the big things, to the small things. Your coursework, this house, your future." A shake of his father's head. "At your age, I was already moving up the firm, saving for a home. I'd even bought your mom a wedding ring." Another shake of the head. "You? I just watched your mom slip you cash as we were leaving. You're not building anything. Not at college, no career. Find something besides that little girl of yours to be passionate about. Something worth your time. Something real." Then they left. Michael stood in the driveway, stunned. His chest tightened, each breath shorter than the last. Then the familiar squeak of brakes cut through the air. Nikki's mom's car, her 2019 Ford Focus, needed a little work. The slightest touch of the pedal gave a long, whiny squeal. Nikki climbed out, a pizza box in one hand and an overnight bag in the other. Michael's jaw tightened. Dad can kick rocks, he thought. The pizza was cold, the movie was bad, and neither of them felt like sleeping in his grandparents' bed. In hindsight, Michael admitted he hadn't really thought it through. The guest bedrooms were disassembled and in the garage. That left the master bed, and something about it felt off limits. So now he lay on the living room floor, staring at the ceiling, back beginning to ache in that familiar way. The dream came fast, vivid. He was back on the back porch. He wasn't alone. A presence behind him, another just out of the frame. Someone brushed a hand through his hair, familiar, loving. Then came the sound, a flash. Was it a shotgun? He wasn't quite sure. And the feeling, not fear, but of being watched. He woke with a dry mouth and a knot in his stomach. The next morning, he kissed Nikki goodbye in front of the glass double doors on campus. They were about to split towards their separate classes when the question hit him, clear and sudden. Where's the key to Grandpa's gun cabinet? His first class was ethics in the workplace. The irony wasn't lost on him. By the time the professor hit slide 6, he had enough of learning for one day. He drove back to the house, fixed a bowl of cereal, and went straight to the bedroom. The cabinet was still locked. He searched the nightstand, found the key tucked inside an old leather-bound Bible on Grandpa's side of the bed. Inside, a modest collection, a few rifles, some shotguns, 2 revolvers, and a couple of pistols. He had learned to disassemble his first gun at the age of 6. A Luger, if he remembered right. Porch light on, Grandpa's voice calm but firm, repeating every safety rule until they were gospel. Michael had never forgotten. His phone buzzed violently on the nightstand. It startled him. Michael didn't realize he was sitting, or that the guns were out, disassembled, cleaned, laid out in 2 perfect rows on the bed. He had no idea how long he'd been there. He grabbed the phone. "Nikki," he apologized. "Promised he'd be on his way." She called back a minute later. "Don't worry. Friend offered to drop me off." Michael didn't think much of it. He stayed seated, eyes drifting over the polished metal, rows of it, tools and memories, ritual and weight. A few minutes later, he heard a car pull up outside. One of the front windows was open. He stood, stretched, walked to the door. When he opened it, it took a moment for his eyes to adjust. A guy was getting out of a mid-2000s Camaro. Nikki was already halfway up the porch steps. "Hey, hon," she said. "This is Steve. He lives a couple houses down from Mom and Dad. Saw I needed a ride, so here we are." Michael smiled, said hi, shook hands, complimented the car. All perfectly normal. Inside, he was a storm. He wasn't the jealous type, and Nikki was the perfect girlfriend. So why does his chest feel tight? Why does his jaw ache from the clenching? Why did he feel heat behind his ears? Something took him back to the dream, the sound, the presence. Had he been angry in the dream as well? Or just waiting for a reason to be? Chapter 6. Present day. The letter. Clara had played out every possibility. A hoax, a prank, some inside joke from a bored editor. But what if it wasn't? What if the letter sitting on her desk was real? What if someone connected to the Zodiac killer, had written her directly? The thought made her pulse spike. Still the question gnawed at her. Why her? The envelope had been addressed with shaky, below-average handwriting. But the name was right, the address correct, and it had been placed carefully, deliberately, exactly where she'd find it. No postage. No one remembers seeing it dropped off. That detail clung to her ribs like a chill. She'd considered keeping it to herself, maybe not mentioning it at the meeting that was now only minutes away. Her instinct told her to wait. Let it simmer. Think it through. And yet, she'd been sitting in that boardroom for years, quietly hoping for one last spark, one story to light up the room, one chance to matter again. She'd been a name once, not a big one, but respected. Now people barely looked up when she entered a room. This letter? It could change that. She scanned the newsroom, looking for any sign of mischief. No smirks, no side eyes, no hidden camera tucked behind the coffee station. Just a regular Thursday morning. She slipped the letter into her binder, silenced her phone, and walked the 45 steps to the boardroom. The meeting unfolded as expected. Routine updates, weekend assignments, coverage plans that blurred together. Clara technically worked in special projects, but there hadn't been anything special in months. Her updates had been polite nods and variations of, all good in my end. Today, something was different. Today she paused, and the pause lingered. She opened her binder slowly, slid the envelope out, and adjusted her glasses. Well, she said, yes, I believe I do have something of interest, if I may. A few heads lifted. Laptops paused, mid-keystroke. This letter was left on my desk, she said, addressed directly to me. Her fingers trembled slightly as she unfolded the papers. The room was still, quiet, in that way that newsrooms only get when something serious is about to happen. She began to read. This is the Zodiac speaking. I've been busy creating what I will call a redemption story. Not my own, but my relation's. He was not a very nice person, I've come to understand, even though, to his family, he was everything. I will give no more information on the original. That is not my purpose. The squatters who were killed on Franklin Park Circle, that was the new Zodiac. The drug dealer with the red puffy jacket, the one who hangs out around Pew's Market, he will not be found. That was the new Zodiac as well. The city will be rid of some of its problems. To the families hurt by the original, this relation is deeply sorry for your pain and loss. Clara reached into her bag and pulled out a small plastic Ziploc. Inside, scraps of what appeared to be blood-stained fabric. She set it gently on the table, steadied her hand, then continued. Write this letter in Friday morning's edition to ensure you will be the only point of contact. The letter was signed with a small Z. The time, 9:18 on Thursday morning. One of the senior editors stood, walked to the door, and without a word, closed it. Chapter 7, The Estate Sale. Nikki and Michael moved like machines those last 2 days. No time for small talk or breaks. Just pricing, arranging, cleaning. It mattered to Michael that everything looked perfect by Saturday at 9 a.m., so it mattered to Nikki too. But they weren't machines. By Friday night at 11:30, they were collapsed on the living room floor with cold pizza and aching backs. Nikki's mom had bought them an air mattress, and it already felt like the most luxurious gift in the world. Michael promised he'd find a way to repay her someday. Saturday, 8:30 a.m. Michael Windsor II and Francesca arrived like critics on opening night. They didn't say much at first, just wandered through the house with hands behind their backs, nodding slightly like they were appraising artwork instead of a life being packed up and sold off. By 8:40, the first potential customer arrived. A woman leaned out her window and asked if it was too early to come up. Nikki, being Nikki, said, "Of course not." 20 minutes later, that same woman tried to buy 3 $2 pillows with a $100 bill. Nikki, ever sweet, directed her to the bank around the corner. Michael silently called her 6 different names and wished her a minor car accident on the way. Just a fender bender, nothing fatal. The next couple of hours, people haggled over flower pots, coat racks, mismatched end tables. Michael played traffic cop more than once, waving arms and barking out warnings to avoid scraping bumpers. But things were selling, fast. His parents even looked satisfied, or at least as close to satisfied as they ever got. Around 11, the couple returned. This very couple had walked through the house earlier with Nikki. Curious, polite. Now they were coming back, and they were heading up the sidewalk with smiles, holding hands like teenagers. They'd fallen in love with the place. Turns out, they'd driven straight to the realtor's office after their first visit and put a down payment on the house. Both were retiring soon, 20 years in with the state of Washington. Their son and daughter-in-law had just bought a house nearby. Michael's parents were visibly pleased, and visibly trying not to show it. The couple, they had a question. They wouldn't be able to move in for 6 months, not until retirement officially kicked in. Would Michael and Nikki consider staying in the house, in the meantime, rent-free, just to keep it from sitting empty? They even offered to buy a bed for the spare room. Nikki declined the bed, but said yes to the rest. The living room would be fine, she said. They'd be happy to keep an eye on the place, coordinate any work, handle deliveries. Michael loved it. One, he had a place to stay. But maybe even more importantly, his dad hated it. He could see it in his eyes. And that was the cherry on top. After the last customer had left, Michael wandered back through the house. He paused in the hallway, staring into the bedroom where his grandfather used to sleep. A sudden chill passed through him, sharp, almost electric. He rubbed his arms, confused. The AC wasn't on, no windows open, just that brief jolt of cold air. Then for half a second, he thought he heard something, a faint whisper, like breath behind the back of his neck. He turned, nothing, just an old house. He shook it off and kept walking. Chapter 8. Francesca Windsor and Anita Hendricks. Francesca Rossi had known she wanted to be a social worker from the first week of her undergrad program. She didn't want power or prestige. She just wanted to help people who needed a hand. She wanted to make a difference. Then she met Michael Windsor II. He was a year ahead, broad-shouldered, quick-witted, studied accounting. He had a plan, the kind that looked good on paper, and even better across a dining room table. The kind of man you could bring home to your parents. Well, if he'd been Italian. But eventually, even that detail was forgiven. By her junior year, she was engaged. A month after graduation, married. California became home. They both found work quickly, Francesca landing a position at the Department of Health and Human Services, where she rose swiftly into management. And there she stayed. She loved the work, loved her team. Their mission? Supporting children and families across the state. It wasn't just a job. It was sacred to her. Her assistant, Anita, had been with her since the beginning. They were work friends, but they had become deeper, closer friends. They didn't do brunch. They didn't double date. But They shared prayers, quiet victories, heartbreaks. They knew each other's families, each other's griefs. When one of them had a problem, it became shared. And now, it was Anita. Anita had lost her husband to cancer the year before. High school sweethearts. The kind of love you don't start over from. Her family, still in Olympia, about an hour south of Seattle, had begged her to come home. Siblings, cousins, nieces, nephews, all eager to wrap her in comfort and casseroles. She had the time off. The department would miss her, yes, but Francesca insisted, "Go. Your healing comes first." So Anita went. Originally, it was supposed to be for 2 weeks, then 3. In the end, it was 42 days before she would walk back through the front door. She had done everything right before she left. She stopped the mail, turned off the water, unplugged the electronics, cleared out the fridge, informed the neighbors that she knew, and bought timers for the lights. She did everything right. But when she returned, there were strangers living in her house. She sat in the driveway, shaking, crying so hard she couldn't see the keypad on her phone. Her fingers found the right numbers by memory alone. "Francesca," she whispered. Inside her home were 4 people, strangers, using her things, wearing her slippers, sleeping in her bed. One of them laughed when she walked in. Another threw a glass at her head as she walked back out the door. The windows were open. The stench of cigarette smoke spilled into the street with bursts of swearing and laughter. It was a violation too big for words. Anita was appalled, terrified, humiliated. Francesca opened her spare room without hesitation. Anita accepted it with trembling gratitude. And now they were learning the ugly truth. Getting strangers out of your own home is far harder than anyone would ever tell. Chapter 9. The Medicine Cabinet. Michael could not explain what was happening. And if he could, who would he tell? His parents? Right. Nikki? Maybe. But she was so happy right now. Her courses were going great. She was playing house and loving it. No, for now, he was taking this new, whatever it was, on himself. It was the nightmares, the internal tremors, he called it, the rage he couldn't explain. He feared he wouldn't be able to control it much longer. So far, it was all in his head. Was he going crazy? He didn't think so. He kept telling himself it was stress. He had a lot going on. There were still items in the basement that needed to be dealt with. Mostly the home decor stuff Nikki had decided they needed. She had convinced him it would be nice to mix some of it with their holiday stuff as a reminder. It was fine with him, but now he had to get it all out of the basement, over to her parents' home, until they found a place for it. He'd been at it for about an hour or so when the headache pain reached a level too intense to ignore. He went upstairs to see if Nikki had anything lying around. Nothing. Then he remembered the cabinet in his grandparents' bathroom, the only place he hadn't touched. He hadn't left it for Nikki to sort through. There were too many bottles. He figured some of it might be worth something. The cabinet creaked as he opened it. The glass was warped and clouded, the way the bathroom mirrors get after years of steam and scrubbing. The frame had started to rust along the edges, and the interior shelves were chipped and bowed. It smelled faintly of metal and old soap. But there were medications he recognized. Vicodin, oxycodone, Xanax, Valium, Ambien. Others he couldn't pronounce if he tried. Labels smudged, ink faded. He hesitated before taking any pills. What would Nikki say if she saw this? He popped 2 Valium anyways, then went back to the job at hand. That's when he noticed a small shoebox sitting next to the light switch, marked Christmas decorations. A laugh escaped him when he thought about Nikki and the look on her face after she spent all that time finally wedging the box between the posts. Now it sat on the floor next to him. He was over this part of the day, The volume was making him feel strange, and it hadn't done anything for the headache. He reached for the box, his fingers working the first layer of tape, not with intent, more out of idle curiosity. The cardboard was soft with age, its corners sagging. Dust clung to the creases like it had been waiting for anyone, to disturb it. Those were his last clear thoughts as his eyelids drooped and his chin dipped towards his chest. After what Michael would call a power nap, he opened his eyes to see the box was opened. He was sitting there, staring down at stacks of old newspaper clippings, their yellowed corners curled like brittle leaves, fragile with time. He picked up the top article. In bold letters, he read, "Zodiac reaches out to the press." Zodiac, he thought. The serial killer? He laid it aside, then another, and another. Cryptic headlines. Ciphers. Black and white photos that made his skin crawl. Then he found the watch. It was cold in his hand, heavy. It looked like the kind Grandpa wore on his hunting trips, but this one had a crude zodiac symbol etched into the cracked face. Michael thought he had had a headache before. Now he doesn't know what he would call it. He thought he might jump out of his skin. The cloth came next, dried, stiff, rust-colored. He didn't want to touch it, but he did. Then, blackness. Michael woke, hearing Nikki calling his name from the kitchen, then again from the top of the basement stairs. His eyes blinked open into a world half-tilted, like a photograph coming out wrong. Something buzzed in his ears. Maybe it was fear. The box sat open beside him, its contents spilled like an accusation. Scattered around him, the articles, the puzzles, the watch, the baggie with torn clothes. Blood. It had to be blood. He scrambled to gather everything, shoved it back in the box with shaking hands. It wouldn't close right. He jammed the lid down and gave it a hard kick across the floor, just as Nikki, footsteps, hit the third step. He staggered upright, his legs wobbly. The whole room tilted again. Nikki froze halfway down. "Michael, what's wrong with you? Do I need to take you to the ER?" His mouth was opened, but no sound came out. His vision blurred. A low hum filled his ears like rising static. What was that? Was it even volume that was in that bottle? The box hadn't moved, but somehow it felt closer. Chapter 10. Grandpa. Michael Windsor had always wondered why his grandfather never talked about his childhood. Like the early chapters of his life had been blacked out on purpose, sealed behind some invisible door he never intended to open. It wasn't until after the funeral, when Michael began sorting through dusty boxes and yellowed documents, that he started to piece together the outline of a life too hard to speak out loud. World War II ended in 1945, but for many in Italy, especially in the South, the devastation lingered long after. Cities lay in rumble. Families buried their dead and tried to rebuild, while the North began to flicker with signs of economic recovery. The South remained tangled in poverty and grief that reached into every alley and hillside. Michael Rossi was born on August 28, 1946, to Hudson and Marta Rossi. 3 siblings came before him, a brother, Simon, and 2 sisters, Paula and Tootie. The Rossi household belonged to Marta through and through. Fiercely devoted, she ruled with rosary beads in one hand and discipline in the other. A proud Roman Catholic, she demanded unwavering devotion from her husband, her children, and herself. Mass was non-negotiable, every Sunday, no exception. She served as secretary at the church, ran the daycare so other moms could worship, and volunteered full-time. To her family, It sometimes felt like the church gleaned more of her than they did. Hudson Rossi was a man of hands and heart, a furniture builder, a craftsman with quiet ambition. Before the war, his work had begun gaining attention in southern Italy. Beds, desks, dining room tables. The Hudson Rossi name was just starting to mean something. Then came the war. The storefront wasn't destroyed, but it may have well been. Buried under rubble, no customers, no commerce. The momentum he had built vanished overnight. To support the family, Hudson took a job in a refrigerator factory. Simon joined him there for a time until he enlisted in the Italian Navy. 3 years, almost to the day, after Simon shipped out, Hudson died. Drunk behind the wheel of a 1958 Fiat, a sharp curve, a rock wall, a life taken. The drinking had started gradually, fed by bitterness and regret, fanned by the weight of expectations and the silent disappointment. Life had grown smaller, duller, and eventually, 3 weeks after the funeral, Marta told everyone the same thing. She'd had a vision. The Lord, she said, had spoken to her, told her to take her family to the United States. She told it to the pews, in the streets, at the market, on the town square steps. And somehow, through donations, gifts, and the relentless force of her conviction, Marta Rossi and her children boarded a ship bound for California. It was the beginning of a new life, not an easier one. It didn't take long for Marta to meet Max Ritter, a pilot out of San Francisco. They never married, but lived together until their deaths in a suspicious house fire in 1971. For young Michael, the move to America was a hurricane. He lost his father, then his siblings, who disapproved of Marta's decision and severed ties. When they left her, they left him too. He was too young to protest. He did what his mother told him to. And then came Max. No television, no snacks, no friends over, no bike, no playing outside on Sundays. The house was a prison, dressed up as discipline. The rules were endless, often forgotten until they were broken. And Michael broke them constantly. Worse, Marta backed Max, stood by him, defended the rules. To Michael, it felt like losing her too. At 16, he left. He drifted through Southern California, scraping by, sleeping in barred corners, working jobs that didn't ask questions, until one day he walked into a recruitment office. The Army offered structure, purpose, a path, and the chance to finish high school. He said yes, and he never looked back. And I think we'll stop there for today. Thank you for listening to Zodiac, Attempted Redemption.